So welcome everyone to the Meshery development meeting. Today is the 24th of November, and we can kickstart this meeting with an update from Sayantan on the refactoring Meshery UI initiative. So Sayantan, the floor is all yours.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yep.
So I would like to share my screen. So yeah, so basically we are planning to we are doing a new restructure of the Meshery, so which is in the Meshery UI restructuring branch. So and this is the command tracker actually which we are following. So to track the progress that have been already completed and the things which are in progress. So basically, I think Aditya has already solved two of them, and the rest I have created some PR for them. And right now, I would like to show you the work which I have done. So basically, this is this is in has changed from 3000 to 4001, and I have I just wanted to match this UI like the original Meshery's UI to this restructure run. So right now I think this is looking quite similar to that of 9081, and I think there was some responsiveness issues also. I tried to fix some of them. So basically right now these adapters are somewhat responsive, and also you can see this is going on top of this, which was not there previously, but right now I made this thing responsive. But the problem occurs when this collapses a little bit. Now yeah, this position, this is the mobile view. Actually in this view this dashboard should collapse on its own, but it's not. I will look into this. So yeah, I made it somewhat responsive than it was previously there. And yeah, that's basically my update from my side, which I have done.
Nice.
I have a comment. I don't think we have to make it responsive that much, like you were saying about the mobile view, because I'm sure that only PC people will be using this. And
No, actually the Meshery's 9081 is that much responsive. So basically if you see this one is more responsive. See, it's
okay,
below
I
like,
got it. Okay.
yeah. So basically I think I should also make this responsive. That's why I'm working on that.
Okay, sure.
Other comments to Sayantan and other updates in this initiative?
So I think Meghna was working on some of like the code editor and big numbers. So is she present in the call?
Meghna is not
No,
on
I
the call.
think. Okay, and Ayushman is also I think not in the call. No, then we don't have any update from others, I think. And I have also added one more component, the progress bar, which need to be written. If anyone would like to take it, they can go ahead with this.
Any other comments?
So one of the maintainers of Meshery UI, Nitish Karthik, is out, or he sends his regrets to today's meeting. He'll be back on Friday. But this, what Sayantan is going over, what Aditya has been working on, and Meghna and some others, it's a significant, it's more or less an overhaul of the UI forthcoming in the next Meshery release. So there'll be a lot of discussion about the UI. But maybe I shouldn't say the discussion as much as a fair bit of refactoring to account for support for React 17 Material UI 5 for Redux and observables. So there'll be state management will be a fair bit of the consideration as the individual components are refactored. Hopefully we'll end up in a place where we have better centralization of themes for colors, for style. We'll also end up in a place where the components themselves are much more reusable, much better written. They're, a factor of that is also the concept that Meshery is a platform that is extendable. Meshery supports plugins, and as such has, part of that refactoring will need to account for extensibility. And so there's a lot in v0.7, the next release, with respect to UI. Actually, we'll probably talk about it later in the call. There'll be whole new dashboards, whole new metrics. Not just new dashboards and new metrics, but new custom dashboards and custom metrics. The ability for people to define what metrics, what they want to see in their panels. So there's a whole mouthful around UI. That's good though. So yeah, so if you know any React.js engineers, tell them about Meshery, tell them about the upcoming release. There's a lot to do. There is another aspect. I don't think Barak is on today, but there is, you guys were talking about like responsiveness and collapsing. I think it was the menu. And that's part of one of the plugins, is that when someone defines a plugin, they should also be able to control whether or not they want the menu collapsed. And so I think we're on the verge of seeing that for the first time. So yeah, there's an open PR on that, I think. Cool. No other comments. Let's go to the next topic.
Yep. Thank you, Sayantan. So next up, Ashish has been working on some workflows for CI tests in adapters. Ashish.
Okay, assuming you can see my screen. So I created this PR in Istio adapter a few days ago to add CI tests in adapter, so that every time the pull request is made on the adapter, we can basically do an end-to-end testing of the adapter, that can we deploy patterns and can the adapter then go ahead and actually provision the service meshes and all. So there was a little bit of refactoring that on my side. So I just wanted to go over a little bit of that to clarify what I'm aiming for right now. So this is my test repository. I've created this to demo and stuff. So what I'm proposing is that we can have a general file, some general file that we can keep somewhere, which does all the heavy lifting. So this would be like the function declaration, and this small little file, we can have this small little workflow in each of the adapters that will actually call this another workflow. GitHub has the feature to reference other workflows. So we can call this another workflow, and we can pass parameters like these are the names of the pods that we expect. These are the, and we expect these. There's a one-to-one relationship between expected pods and expected namespaces. So we expect this pod in this namespace, and then we can pass the URL of the deployment, URL of the service, name of the adapter. So it's like a function invocation of this entire workflow. And yeah, that would run our job. And if these particular pods that we expected, like I expected here Istio egress and Istio ingress and Istio in Istio system. So if that is satisfied, the workflow would pass, and if not, the workflow would fail. One more thing would be added here is that before running the actual test job, I will run another job that to update the pattern file that will be used to basically to reflect latest versions in that. So that's kind of yeah, so that's the thing. So instead of creating an entire action, just create a general workflow and put it somewhere, and then you keep referencing it in all the adapters that we create. And in future, it's not just about installation of a service mesh that we can test. We can have our pattern file do anything, and then we can just keep expecting pods here and in their suitable namespaces. So there would be almost little to no code change if we want to extend our the functionality with which our tests are run. So anyone has any comments to it?
So were you able to try it out, like reference this script, like reference general.yaml from a different repository?
From a different okay, so currently I'm referencing it from my current repository, but in the docs it doesn't specify that. I don't think it specifies that it needs to be in the same repository. I think it can be in different. It actually can be in a different repository. The only thing is that the repository shouldn't be private.
Okay. So yeah, this looks good if we, I mean, yeah, this should be good if we don't want to make new actions. And yeah.
I know Mario has a perspective.
Yeah, can we see the general one?
Yeah, so to go over quickly, it sets up the Minikube, it checks out the adapter code, builds that image locally, and then sets up the Meshery configuration, starts the adapter, starts Meshery server, starts Minikube tunnel so that we can reach Meshery server, then checks the logs and allocates the external IP. Basically, what happens is that in the config.yaml of in the config.yaml of Meshery, we need to specify the correct IP address that we got from that we got after we did Minikube tunnel. So we reset the Meshery address, and then finally we do the pattern apply, which is currently hard coded. Okay, so this deploy underscore istio.yaml, in each of the adapter we would have deploy underscore traffic.yaml, but those won't actually be static. We would run a job to actually update these YAMLs to reflect our latest versions and all, and then we sleep for some time, and then we check the logs, adapter logs, Meshery logs, to see if I mean, it would be helpful in debugging, and then we basically do our final thing. We get the pod names and we loop through all of the pods to check if they are actually running in their asked namespaces or not.
Oh, I see. So this is general to test adapters, right? Really oriented to testing any adapter.
Yeah, adapter, yeah.
Okay, about the code, could you go to where the code is? Isn't it compiled somewhere?
The adapters code.
Yes.
Yeah. Here, after I check out the in each of the adapter, we have the Docker file in our root, so we just build the Docker image.
Oh, I see. Cool. Is the checkout code? So would it check out the code of the current?
Yeah, it checks out the
repo?
Code of. It checks out the code of the basically the latest commit that I'm referencing, like this particular commit that that was made with this particular pull
like
request.
The current branch.
No, yeah, I mean the branch on which the pull request was made. So any changes that you made in that commit would be actually checked out and built.
Cool. It looks good. So then once this is invoked from some other workflow, the adapter would be already, how can you say it, installed or added to the Meshery server?
Can you repeat your question?
Yeah, my question is, let's say this is part of some other workflow where there will be an end-to-end test. So the other workflow would depend on like the UI and the server being there, and then running this would add whatever adapter we're using this for to our Meshery server.
this particular workflow is actually very, very specific to this current use case. So the only place we would use it would be to the only job we would use it to would be for testing the functionality of our adapters. And inside in the context of this particular workflow, Meshery server would be running, and the particular Meshery adapter would be running. So if we are running basically if you're running for Istio, the only adapter that would be running would be Istio adapter. And I mean, if we are, the same goes for other adapters as well. So the only things that would be running would be Meshery server, and then Meshery adapter, and the adapter of that particular, some given adapter, like for in this example the Istio adapter, in whichever repository we are.
Is there a way to, or is there a need to have multiple adapters being added? Like, not really sure if that's a use case we would desire.
Multiple adapters being, I don't know. I don't think so. Why would we need traffic mesh adapter in Istio's workflow? I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm just thinking some testing scenarios where we want to test functionality with multiple adapters, but I'm not that familiar, so that's why I'm asking to the bigger audience.
So this particular workflow has been made to with the one thing that has been kept in mind is that this would be used only and only for one particular adapter, and you can pass the adapter name here, like I have done Istio.
Okay, so one at a time.
Yeah, one at a time. So because we are we would be customizing these arguments in different adapters. For example, in traffic mesh, if we would be expecting different pods and in different namespaces with different deployment URL, different service URL, and the adapter name would be different. And this would be this particular workflow would not be used for any other thing other than to test the functionality of a given adapter. And to be more specific, to test, I mean, it uses meshops v2, it doesn't use meshops v1, so it does pattern apply, so it uses patterns. So the functionality that would be tested, and it can be extended in future, that anything that has been given in the pattern. So for example, in Istio pattern, we can along with that deploy Istio service mesh, we can add add-ons as well. So we can add the pod names of those given add-ons here in and specific namespaces. So the only use case that this would cater would be to test whether an adapter is able to deploy and provision a service mesh and add-ons and anything that has been given to a particular pattern file to that adapter. And and this workflow would not be used for any other use case other than that.
Of course. Yep. Looks good. Looks like it's it'll be fit for the main use case that's desired right now. Cool. That's all. Thanks.
And I didn't make it to cater to Meshery because we all also need the workflows for Meshery as well. But here because this specific workflow deploys the service meshes, and it is very biased towards in the way it works is it deploys service meshes, it deploys something, it uses pattern deploy, and I don't think we would maybe we would test that in Meshery server, maybe not, maybe we would, but we would be testing a lot more things than just to deploying service meshes. So that way, this particular workflow has been made just for the adapters and for all the adapters, and in each adapter we would need only this much of stuff, this much of code.
Ashish, for my part, I have to admit to not having digested all of what you had said earlier. In part, some of Mario's line of questioning reminds me of some of the things that I would have asked earlier about the reuse of these workflows. So setting this one aside, which is custom and specific to only one repo, because we're building a component in that repo and it's intended to use the particular artifact that's built. I guess this isn't that one. This is custom to the Istio adapter. This actually isn't. This is custom to the deployment of Istio, which it saddens me to see that we're using manifest here because we're trying to get away from manifest. We've been trying to get over to Helm. This is bothersome. I think
okay, so as I said in the earlier meeting as well, I do not know whether mesh deploy, we can, whether we can pass the URL of, basically, I don't think, Piyush, you are in the meeting, as you're in the meeting, is there a way by using Meshery CTL, I can deploy an adapter with a custom image? If there is, then yes, I can build the image, then I push it to the registry and then use it from there. But do you think there is a way to do that, to use custom images other than edge and stable?
Okay, I don't think there is anything we can like define what image we want to be there. We can only specify that we want this adapter to be deployed and at this port. Yeah, only that thing.
Yeah, so
in the Helm chart, right?
I'm not sure that would, there is no feature like that.
Right. So the environment in which you're deploying the custom built adapter, or the adapter that's built at the runtime of this workflow, that's being deployed inside of Kubernetes. There is not a Docker environment in which we're testing this, right?
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, as you go through this, you'll find potential use cases for enhancements to Meshery CTL or to the customization of the Helm charts. Both Meshery CTL for like mesh, for Meshery CTL mesh, Meshery CTL, you might find it for some of the other ones as well. Yeah, it's not good. Like it would almost be just as good to not use those YAMLs at all, because we're trying to get, move away from them, and just use a Docker command to deploy, or a kubectl command to deploy it instead, without necessarily referencing it. Yeah, it's kind of a tough situation to be in, because if you could use kubectl with no YAML, which is not really any better than doing what you're doing. And these have at least been used for a while.
Okay, so one thing we can do is maybe have some kind of because the Helm-based installation that we currently have, it has a parameter for override value. So we can override the image name there, but we need to flow that image name from our, up to there. So we can have some kind of environmental variable while running, I don't know, maybe Meshery CTL that actually helps us override some stuff, because other than doing that, I don't see any way to externally pass some custom image name towards that thing. And
Helm, you can use the values.yaml file. So we have to just modify our Helm charts to support that kind of a thing.
Yeah, we can, of course, we can. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We can use the values.yaml, but the thing is that you're saying that, are you asking to use just the Helm charts, or are you asking to use Meshery CTL mesh deploy?
Ideally, it could be either. Like probably in the end, that we would, if Meshery CTL was robust enough to allow specification. Right now, it allows specification of any tag that you want for image name. Like you can't change the image name, at least for Kubernetes deployments. For what do you call it? Docker-based deployments, you can change the image name, because I don't know that we're rewriting the entire Docker file each time that you go, the compose file each time. Anyway, yeah, it's a use case. Like ultimately, if we have quite robust tooling in Meshery CTL, that you could provide that customization kind of directly there inside of mesh config. It's not a primary focus for us, because it's just kind of off to the side. It's a nice to have. It facilitates this type of testing. It potentially facilitates someone running their own custom built adapter. I don't know why that they necessarily would. It at some point we will be deploying any number of Meshery perf containers. that doesn't mean that a custom image name or custom Docker Hub repo name is our first priority. People who are deploying offline, or people who are deploying might choose to use the same image names, but use a different repository. I'm sorry, not repository, Docker index, Docker, what do you call it? Registry, Docker registry. And then they could use the same names, but have totally different images in there. There are ways for people to circumvent it, even though the project doesn't directly support it today. Yeah, probably it's easiest and first to start with modifying Helm values. And then from there, providing the ability to support custom image names in mesh config, which from mesh config, that would drive a Helm values, or it would drive a Docker compose. Having said all of that, I actually don't think it's worth it. Like, I think you should stay with the manifests that are there. It's just it's like our duty to point out that, like, oh, that's not what we want. Like, we should make a note of that. It's probably not something we go actively work on, but we should now be aware that, like, manifests were just deprecated and we weren't used, and they're not used anywhere. Wait, now we're using them somewhere. We should, like, it should be a note. Don't delete them. Try to keep track of them. That kind of a thing. So so in this particular, so to digest this a little bit further, you're specifying test assertions in here about expected pods, great expected namespaces. And what's the difference between those three expected namespaces? Is that just an example?
Yeah, yeah, just an example.
Okay,
because,
gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. The adapter name is Istio, so you're, like, also hard coding and appending Meshery hyphen.
I'm using adapter name to to basically grab that particular name to check out the logs and all those things. So so that I don't have to keep referencing that particular adapter name inside of the workflow. So I'll be using the term, for example, to know whether the Istio pod has started, Istio adapter has started or not. I need to grab that thing from kubectl.
Yeah.
So,
why? Like, why aren't you using Meshery CTL system status? What I'm saying is, like, I really would press the issue to dog food. Don't write anything new, reuse our own tooling where we can. And if the tooling doesn't have those capabilities, like, it's good use cases for enhancing our tooling. And I know that like, by the way, the work that you've done, this is great. And by the way, you did it quickly, briskly. We should put this into action. Like, we should go, if these tests are passing, like, hey, well, we need this stuff pretty quickly. And to propagate it, it's nice that that GitHub allows you to reference other workflows. So if it was propagated across 10 repos, and then later you swapped out a particular bash, kubectl command with a Meshery CTL command, like, it's probably not too much work to have that propagated and things. So for my part, it sounds like you're getting a lot of negative feedback, or like, but that's not the case. Like, rather, this is great. We work iteratively all the time. Some of these other points that are being made are like, oh yeah, okay, there's a potential enhancement there, a potential enhancement there. Some of these aren't going to be worth necessarily doing. And some of them probably are over time, because we'll have, not recursive, but we'll have sort of, while testing an adapter, we might have regression tests of other Meshery components as well, which is good. The pattern, so yeah, it's also, I mean, as you think on this, and you've done a good job of, like, splitting out where this is an adapter specific considerations, and then, we can centralize some of these more common functions about, like, deploying a Kubernetes, deploying doing a Meshery server deploy, and these things. That's great, because this forms the foundation then for a bunch of reuse of these. And these may eventually use some of our Meshery GitHub actions as well. In the components where we're not trying to test an active, like in the builds where we're not trying to test an active artifact. Because yeah, like the thing is like in some of those GitHub actions, like the one for service mesh performance, it needs a Kubernetes cluster. It needs to deploy Meshery. Well, that's the same thing that needs to be done here, except you just have The build artifact that's transient is just this single adapter, but all of the rest should be the same. And so that's in part why I impress upon all of us, like, hey, if this script is very long, it's like, why is it long? Why aren't we have prior art here. How do we reuse that? Some of it is like, well, it was written under a different pretense, under a different use case. So it doesn't exactly, it doesn't exactly line up. And so it's easier and quicker to write out what we have. Now, long term, it's the sustaining cost is much higher. So anyway, yeah, that's my feedback.
Sustaining cost of what is much higher?
Of sustaining two independent things. So if you're deploying Kubernetes one way here, deploying it one way here, you're testing an adapter and testing assertions of whether or not a mesh is up over there, doing it in that way, this way. That's actually why we were trying to get rid of the manifest, because the sustaining cost of both manifest and Helm charts was both the sustaining cost, but also just the number of bugs that people were seeing. So like part of the benefit of reuse is in concept, speed, time to market, like speed of delivery. Also then quality through reuse, because you hopefully have fewer bugs, and also hopefully lower sustaining costs because you're sustaining fewer lines of code with higher quality, and so ultimately happier users. That's the concept. It doesn't always work out beautifully as you're demonstrating. That like some of the Meshery CTL commands weren't written in that context, so they don't quite support that thing. And so overall, like, this is really great. Let's go turn it on. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah, I'll try to replace these kubectl commands with as many Meshery kernel commands as I can. And can you give me an idea of where you think this central this thing should be, this YAML?
Yeah, it might be Meshery. It might be the Meshery server repo. In part because like we would really hope for it to be true that we figure out we don't like to run Minikube, or just as just a random example, like we get opinionated about some of the common procedures that we use to set up these continuous integration environments. And that same process gets used in the Service Mesh Performance project, in the Service Mesh Patterns project, in Meshery proper, in the adapters, yes, but also then in the other externalized components like Meshery Perf will be another component, and Meshery Operator as another component. And so what I was trying to say is, like, if you put it in Mesh Kit, that's kind of a central, a decent location, because most components will leverage that. Ultimately, I don't know that it matters that much. It's probably Meshery just because it's the big rock, the center of gravity. This is great. Ashish, as you go to, if you would, please add an update to the build and release documentation that itemizes what you just said today. Like here's what these files are. Here's their hierarchy. Here's how this one is supposed to be reused. And then that way it'll help some of the rest of us digest as well the fact that there already is kind of an extensibility and reuse built into what you've done. We should reflect.
Where do you want me to note it down?
The build and release. I'll put a link in Meshery docs.
Okay.
Part of that then is all of us should reflect on opportunities for our actions to be used in some of those workflows. Some of them aren't appropriate. Some of them are highly appropriate for what's trying to be accomplished. Some of them might need to be augmented to say, when the action fires, like just like when the Microsoft engineers from Open Service Mesh were saying, oh, great, we'd love to use this GitHub action for SMI to test the conformance. Except this GitHub action is assuming that I want to pull a container that's already out, that I've already built and pushed. And they don't. They were saying, no, we don't. We want to test the local artifact that's being built inside of this CI. And so that GitHub action already has an open request to do the very thing that you're talking about. Right, Rudraksh?
Yep.
Cool, that's great. By the way, hopefully, Ashish, man, like, I don't know if I haven't had a lot of coffee, so I might not be sounding chipper. This is from my part, and Mario was giving feedback and stuff. This is fantastic. We really, really, really need this stuff. It's nerve-wracking to make a release of something. You're just kind of keeping your fingers crossed that like there isn't something broken inside. There's It's good. Next topic.
Thank you, Ashish. Like this discussion very well segues to the next topic on Helm-based deployment of Meshery operator. So I guess Rudraksh can tie that off with he tied it off with the PR that is linked in the meeting minutes. So Rudraksh, like, could you give us some notes on it?
Yeah, so basically, and as Navindu mentioned, that Meshery operator is now deployed using Helm charts, and we are off manifest in that regard. And with v0.6, I guess we aim to get completely away from manifest so that we don't have to maintain all these things, and all these conversations have taken place in this call once. So I think we are in a good position now, and we have caught all the places we were actually using manifest and replaced them. And the other thing is that there was just this issue that I noticed a little late, but better late than never. And it was like it has been referenced in the past. It's about malformed version Edge latest. It happens because the library that we use for checking releases, I mean, latest release for GitHub repositories, it doesn't treat Edge latest as a new one, I mean, a semantic version, and that's why it gives an error. So the upstream code for deploying operator might be failing right now, and this PR that I linked in the chat would take care of this. Other than this, there is a short note. Because how Helm is designed, Helm doesn't like when your cluster already has some objects which the Helm chart aims to improve, aims to install. So if you have pre-deployments, like if Meshery operator is deployed in your cluster before, whether using manifest, then when you upgrade to v06, you'll have to first remove the operator yourself manually first. That's because Helm won't actually recognize that installation as installed by itself. You can probably edit the annotations on that deployment of the operator, but I suggest that it's easier to remove it and let Meshery server install it once again. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, I have something to say about Helm having problem with already installed or present resources. Okay, I like Linkerd was also facing similar issues with the multi-cluster part of it, and what they were implementing, what they implemented is they started deleting resources with the labels, matching the labels in the entire cluster. So my suggestion is that we after uninstalling Meshery, we kind of search the cluster with the labels we have, like if we are attaching label to every Helm chart, we like scrap them and delete them manually, not manually, I mean programmatically, after uninstalling Meshery. So that might clean out the whole cluster with Meshery resources. and no user should face this error that something is already present. Am I making sense?
So even if Helm discovers that object, like the thing that you're pointing to is right, okay, that should work. But even if that resource doesn't have that annotation that it is managed by Helm, Helm would refuse to install it even then, because it would say that Meshery operator is already present in this cluster. It is not managed by me, so I'm not going to touch it. So a complete cleanup is the best thing to do here, and in my opinion, we should do that. Right now, Meshery CTL takes care of doing that because Helm doesn't. So we are being careful here. So did it make sense?
Kinda. More than mine, at least.
Other comments here?
Just a quick recap from the, okay, yeah, no, good, yeah, good. Sorry, bad question.
So I think we can move on to the next topic. All right. So Utkarsh has a demo on dry running a custom mesh map designer. So Utkarsh, off you go.
Okay, so the demo is about being able to try run or verify the designs that we create in Meshmap. What exactly that means is that, let's say I'm not running all of the components and all of the adapters, and that's why I'm only getting this one dropdown. If someone is thinking why I'm having only a single dropdown. The demo is actually about the ability to verify if your deployment is, if your provisioning process is actually going to go through without actually touching the infrastructure. So let's say I am designing my infrastructure here in Meshmap. I click on the, I drag application. So what this is supposed to do is at least create an application for me in the cluster. So I've just dropped it. I have not actually filled this particular form. So what it's actually missing right now is container details, labels, annotations. Labels, annotations is not a required field, but definitely a container is, or multiple containers are, because obviously most probably if you are deploying your application, you do want to run a process in there. So let me try to just hit verify. This particular button. If someone remembers, I don't expect everyone to remember, but if someone remembers, this icon used to be disabled earlier because this was something in progress. Dry run was not something that was available in Meshery. But recently, that particular capability was added to Meshery server as an endpoint. So what this does, this button, is that it will, when I will hit it, it will actually reach out to Meshery server and it will try run this entire thing. The entire, basically the entire design that you will create here. It could be 1 node, 2 nodes, 3 nodes, or hundreds of nodes. And it will try run it. It ensures that it doesn't touches your infrastructure so that your infrastructure is safe. So let's say, even if your 10 nodes were fine, while 11th one had a problem, it's not going to deploy those 10 things. And then after that, it's not going to tell you that, okay, I actually tested 10, but 11th one had problems. So now your infrastructure is in a stage where what you wanted is not exactly the final stage. So basically, that's what the purpose of this verification is. That is, if this particular thing says that this thing is going to go through, the chances are that yes, it will actually go through. The reason is that it does multiple kind of tests, like the query plan that it has prepared, is that going, does it have cycle or something like that? And it will also check that the fields that you have filled in here, are they proper or not? Not only if not only if you have filled the fields or not, also are they valid or not? So you cannot actually type in replicas field, you cannot actually type in alphabet, because that's not valid. So if it will actually hand it over to Kubernetes, and the deployment will actually fail, because definitely you cannot have a yeah, I hope I'm making sense. So let's try something fill in here. Because this is a static analysis, so someone can say, okay, I'm filling in test and image test. That's probably not an image that's available. So what is going to happen? Is the try run going to fail, or is it going to succeed? It will actually succeed, because static analysis, it cannot actually verify if this image already exists or not, or it cannot verify that if the image exists after creating the container, is it going to run or not? That's not at least what Meshery supports right now, because as I mentioned, it's a static analysis. So let's try to hit verify again. It says verified successfully. So it's almost guaranteed that when I would hit deploy, it will actually provision this particular application for me. Definitely, I'm not sure if there is actually an image called test. Most probably there is not. So in the cluster, this deployment will probably fail. But other than that, yeah, so the static analysis portion is what this particular try running is sort of offering. So any questions, any suggestions? One of the things that someone may have noticed that when I hit verify, okay, it's saying verified successfully, but when it was saying that verification failed, it was just saying verification failed. It was not exactly telling why it failed. So that's something, that's a UX that needs to be added, and I was not quite sure how, where to exactly put it. So right now there's a snack bar. It tells you that, okay, verification failed. And if you have hundreds of nodes here, you might be asking, okay, it failed, but what's exactly failing for me, so that I can go ahead and fix it. So that's something that actually needs to be added. Any comments, any suggestions? Yep. Yeah, definitely. Actually, this is already verified, so I just didn't change that. But yeah, actually.
But that's kind of you. That's kind of you not to say that I was the one that called it verified. Good, awesome. I apologize, but when you had done the demo and you had an invalid design, there was a snack bar that came out and told the user.
It just said that it's a verification fail. Right now it doesn't tell why it failed, not because that functionality is not available in the API. It actually does tell you what exactly is failing. But because I was not quite sure where to show that information, because like Snackbar would actually fill up completely. It was not looking good because I tested it out. So that's so I've basically left it out right now. Okay.
For Barek and Aditya and some other folks that are close to this, and then just for the rest of you who are on the phone, as you think about this from a user's perspective, you know, when you're online, you're on a web page, you're filling in a form, which Raphael just did, which is great, Raphael. You're filling in the text fields, and you know, more often than not, there's an immediate feedback from the form validation. A lot of times you're filling in a form and it validates right there. You know, the way that, okay, which is, Karsh, if you don't mind, if you open back up that tooltip, this is, I think I'm walking through this as much from my own understanding as everyone else's maybe, is that there's a distinguishment between the server-side functionality that you're referring to with the validate capability. There's a distinguishment between kind of form-based validation of the fact that you typed in a string into the namespace field that Kubernetes could actually interpret and then would actually apply and be successful applying. There's a difference between that and the validate button, which could do things like, well, I wanted to give an example using the same namespace example. and it kind of leads me to question how capable this validate function is. Like it's nuanced, but we're kind of walking through it now. There's like client-side form field validation of like, did you type in a digit when it was expecting a string? There's this server-side validate that you just demonstrated, that like its function is this static analysis of, which takes the client-side stuff a little bit further to say, well, is Meshery server, it has a registry of these various various operations, basically a catalog of capabilities that all the Meshery adapters and Meshery server itself have basically signed into that registry and said, here's the things that I'm capable of. And so that static analysis just says, well, is that even, if you have this pattern that's asking for all these things, like, could I even possibly execute that? And I think that's the focus of what you just demonstrated. There's another step and kind of component to this, which is this probably this other word, dry run, which is, well, yeah, like, hey, I've got all those, Meshery might have all those capabilities listed in the registry, but it turns out your particular Kubernetes environment may, just as an example, like it can't accept any more namespaces, like it's plumb full. And so before you try to do an actual deployment, you might want to do a dry run where you're, like if this concept is familiar to most of you, but I'll give one other analogy. And it's like, if you've ever done a SQL plan, it's kind of like that. If you've ever done a Terraform plan, it's kind of like that. The cool thing about a SQL plan, who's done a SQL plan? I'm just curious.
Hi.
Nerd. Push those glasses back up. Sorry. Yeah, good. I haven't done a whole bunch of them, but one of the things that I was impressed with, back then was, well, part of it was that static analysis sometimes included what you would anticipate in terms of performance of that particular query. It's like, don't we do a lot around performance here? And like maybe trying to optimize what that, your optimal configuration. Like, I wonder if in the future we wouldn't have an optimize button, or if part of like the dry run step might be, they might have phases where it's like verification of capacity, and then, sort of verification or analysis of optimal config, optimal performance. So for my part, I think some really cool things to include here. And one of the things that I begin to wonder, and this is where I wanted all of you to think about for a moment, is when you're filling in the form here and it says, oh, you can't have digit, you can't have symbols in the namespace field. It's like, okay, that's simple client-side validation, great. But like this server-side validation that Utkarsh was just demoing, it's like, it seems like a potential user preference that some people might want. They might say like, look, this Meshery system is connected to my actual environment. I've got this much capacity. I'm only running these 2 adapters. I'm only going to run Linkerd at this version. So please don't let me mesh map. Please don't, or Meshery UI. Like, don't let me design a pattern that I'm just not going to be able to use. Like, don't let me, get me into that situation. Like, prevent, so the notion that there's continual static analysis being done and the user is being given feedback. It's not that it's an invalid string that you've typed into the namespace. It's that like your system is full. So rather, that's a bad example. The capacity example is bad. It's more like you don't have that capability in your registry. You're trying to provision an Istio pattern, but you only have Linkerd configured. So yeah. We should probably write that down somewhere.
Yeah, so actually one thing that which sort of you covered was one part of dry running that is not yet supported, and it's because of some reasons. It will be supported, definitely. And that is, right now what we don't support is dry running stuff on Kubernetes. That is, we do all of the analysis on our part, but we don't yet actually dry run on Kubernetes. The reasons actually are that meshkit function, meshkit apply manifest doesn't yet support dry run, although client Go supports and apply manifest, apply Helm also supports. So yeah, that's actually the reason that we are not dry running that. Also, just sort of covering that. Other than definitely we are using RGSF forms. It has access JSON schema. So what exactly is different? What is exactly is different from the basically the errors that we get here, or from the server side dry run? And that is actually first thing is so right now what I just did is drag the node and drop in here. The other things that you can actually do is actually you can go to pattern section. You can load the previous designs. I should probably say you can load previous designs from here. It could have interdependencies. That's not something that the client actually verifies. That's something execution feasibility is something that the server is actually going to verify. The other part of it is actually Meshery server also has concept of selectors. So every the dry running actually happens in stages also, like provisioning does. The concept of selectors is that Meshery, using its SQL database, all of the data that it collects from the cluster, it can actually decide on your behalf that what resource should it pick for deployment if you have not mentioned a version, or let's say something like that. So that's also something that Meshery does on. It's actually, if someone is going to check when it happens, I think it happens in stage 3. That's where it actually checks, okay, I think that this is a resource that I should pick to deploy, and then it will actually verify. And that's not something that's quite available in the client, because that intelligence is built in the server. So this is sort of the difference in the client side verification, server side verification. And definitely, like there are a few obvious things that needs to be improved, and that is dry running, Kubernetes, provisioning. So yep, a few things I had to add.
Nice. So Navendu said his internet's going in and out. He might not be able to hear us at the moment, but we're right at time. We didn't make it through all the agenda items. And so Navendu, if you can hear us, do we have anything critical?
Yep. Maybe we can help Pranav with the customer error page issue so that he can get on.
Yeah, actually, the error which the issue statement said that I was not able to reproduce on my system. I tried a lot, but I wasn't. So if somebody could help me to when does it actually happen, this error, so that I can move forward with it.
Okay, or you just need to make up an error, like it doesn't, like the particular error doesn't necessarily matter. It's more like, hey, what do we want to show when any error comes by?
Okay, that I was working on, because let me share my screen, then I will show it. Is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Actually, I was working on the UI of this particular page which I was making for that error. So right now it just has these standard like strings which we're using on other website as well. And this is a button. But other than that, this page looks very empty. So I was also wondering what else can be added to this particular page.
Suggestions from others? What a real opportunity this particular page is, both to probably give a little snark, even graphically, potentially with a little, I don't know, some little thing, but also like that discussion forum concept is quite fantastic. It's like, hey, and by the way, I don't know what language we all want to necessarily use. I think of Meshery as more of an app, a web app than the term page. We might want to think way of potentially, but what an opportunity this is to do a couple of things that I know Piyush has been hot on in the past, and some of the rest of you, and that's somebody bumps into this, they're like, oh, okay, well, most of the time, if most of us, it's going to be like, well, I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I probably need some help. If they're gonna, if they're gonna invest and get some help, like they'll hit that discussion forum link, or they'll hit the whether they go open a GitHub issue or they go open a discussion forum, whether they go into Slack or whether they there's a myriad of questions that they'll need to bring, or details they'll need to bring with them in order to get help. And that is, as Pranav receives them and says, okay, let me see if I can help you with that. Hey, what version of Meshery are you running? Oh, good. Is that on Kubernetes? Okay, good. And he's got what's your system environment look like? And so Piyush has been tracking the concept of a diagnostics bundler, like a report, like bundle my diagnostics and drop into a zip for me. So you can make it easy to me to attach that to an issue or attach it to a discussion forum. And so not that that's ready today, but and we have an opportunity to show that to people here. Okay. Who else has feedback? Anybody think that, there's a little bit of personality and kind of a preference that we begin to set in the tooling here? It seems like, my general experience has been, well, you know what? Actually, I'll say this for a moment, and that is that we're all consumers. We all have some of our favorite brands. Think about why it is that you like those brands. What it is that you enjoy about them? Who likes, I don't know. This is a bad, anyway. Who likes navigating an enterprise site, a web page? You go to cisco.com and go there, and then go to something else that's much, much smaller. There's a difference between the level of stock photos, the images that make you feel like it's totally and completely impersonal, and they have equal representation of your Asian, your Indian, your Caucasian, and it's so sanitized, right? It's so impersonal, which is safe politically for that company, for that multinational company that wants to try not to use any language that might upset or offend some of the language. Anyway, the point of me walking through this is to say, in part, this is kind of a decision point. To date, it's been fairly, there's a built with love, which is a little bit well, that's an improper use of the word love. Well, no, it isn't actually. Yeah, anyway, point is, think about it, everybody, how much snark should be included. So if there is a graphic included, is it a serious one, or does it have a bit of comedy to it? So, cool. Deepak, who I don't think is on, he'd been Mr. Wick in the community. He'd been kind of working on a 3D graphic or rendering a couple of 3D graphics. It's like a static graphic that might be might have a good place here. Cool. Pranav, please do raise up the question about the thing that you just showed. How would that be hooked in such that any crash will call up that error? That display that.
That is what I was not able to find out. What crash would give that page on the Meshery website?
Rather, asking it. Good. Asking it from a different direction. It's like, how do we ensure that any crash displays that? So, how do we have a global error handler? So.
I will try to look into it more.
That's great. Nice.
Thank you, Pranav. So before we wind up today's call, I'll just point out that we have a Meshery build and release meeting for tomorrow. So Meshery, I guess before that we will have some release candidates ready to for the V06 0.6 release. So we can look into that on the build and release meeting as well, and probably look into the Meshery roadmap as well. So the link to the build and release meeting minutes is in the chat. You can join tomorrow and check on it. So, yep. I'll see you guys then. Bye.
Bye. Bye, guys.